Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Well, it's not an episode of 10,000 miles, unless the guy I've been on about 9,999 of them with is on an episode. Hey, Coach, how you doing today?
So far, so good. How are you doing, Vic?
I'm doing pretty good. It's been a busy week. It's been a lot going on, a lot of good stuff. I had to write a little paper today and do some research on the tariffs impact because, as we move into this and talk about coaching and emotional intelligence and data and all the things that, you do every single day, people are reaching out to us trying to understand what the impacts of the tariffs may be. So the good news is a lot of really great and well-written articles out there on what may or may not happen. So my job is just to aggregate them all into about 5 or 6 pages so people can consume them. How's your day going and your week?
Good. Yeah, so far so good. Just doing what it is I do.
Yeah,
well, that's what each day.
That's what I wanted to talk to you about tonight. We've you were nice enough to come on last quarter and sort of run through my book with me, and but we never really talked about coaching in the depths that you and I have talked about coaching. Gosh, for 25 years, maybe more, right? Since the personal power tapes have made its way from someone to you and then from you to me. And you want to hear something funny? I was cleaning out a storage unit and I found books that you made me with CDs in the sleeves of like all other different versions with your handwriting on the CDs.
Oh my gosh,
volume 1, volume 3. And it was good stuff.
I think that was probably the Chet Holmes stuff, probably.
Maybe
Ultimate
that's what
Business
it is.
Mastery collection, if I recall.
Hey, for the audience here, obviously Coach and I, and Tony, Coach Tony Palmucci, Anthony Palmucci, for those who choose to call him that. Tony and I go way back, just about 40 years. We've been through a lot of stuff together. We work together in multiple industries, from the music industry, recording bands, making music, into this thing we call the channel. And I watched Tony evolve into a masterful business results coach, an executive coach. And early on in the founding of his company, as he was out, singing for his supper, as they say, many, many years ago, he said, "Hey, would any of your people be interested in coaching at your organization?" Pardon me. And I said, "Hey, let me reach out and find out." And lo and behold, it was a mass run to it because people had heard about it and they knew I had spoken so highly of coaching and my concept of coaching. And now a shared concept of Coach and I is that coaching isn't for the broken. Coaching is for the superstars to make them even better. And the analogy, Coach, that you and I talk about all the time is go to any professional sporting game where people are practicing at the most elite levels, and there's as much of a coaching staff as there are players on the field, right? And these are the elite of the elite. These are the best of the best. You would think these are the people that are done with coaching and just need to keep repping and practicing, but there's always this fine tuning. So Coach and I have had a lot of success together in what he does. But what I wanted to do today, Tony, was I want to peel back the onion a little. I wanted you to give the audience an opportunity to really, understand your journey into coaching a little bit, not spend a ton of time on it because I really want to get into the meat of the conversation. And then I want you to explain what coaching is and isn't, what's your approach to it, why it may be different, why you're special in the channel versus other people who may have enrolled in a Robbins coach or something like that. And I've got notes, so I'll walk us through topic by topic here, but start off and, tell us about your journey into how you got into creating TWR.
For me, it was just the desire to grow, that constant, never-ending improvement in all areas of life. So for me, I started studying neurolinguistic programming, and I took a 1.5 year master certification course during that time just to work on my own leadership and influence skills as a business owner myself. So I
Mm-hmm.
was running a team that, as I call now, that are running my music school. They're all millennials.
Yeah.
So learning about influence was always a huge desire for me, and leadership. So it kind of put me on that path. Always a big Robbins and personal development guy myself, from
Mm-hmm.
the music business and then into business. And that's kind of where the crossroads came. I actually hired a coach. I'd had a lot of success with hiring mentors in my music school business and throughout my journey in the music business. And I thought, wow, I'm going to go to the top and I'm going to hire the best. So
I'm
the
getting
goal was,
Tony.
yeah, I'm going to go to the
Yeah.
mountain. I'm going to go get Robbins himself
Yeah.
to help me grow and scale a business that at the time I wanted to turn into a franchise model. Currently still going to this day as the franchise prototype. But I kind of took a left turn when I was asked by Tony after about 2.5 years to join his business results coaching team. So I went through the certification process
Yeah.
of executive coaching. And I said, wow, I really like this. It was very enjoyable because I got to talk to business owners like myself and use a bit of the science and the art to kind of help guide them to being able to scale their business. And the motto is, of course, a business is a system that runs without you in it. And the question is always, hey, are you working in your business today or are you working on your business? And that
Important
always
distinction.
resonated with me because
Yeah.
I was working in the business so much. So going through that process myself as a business owner and hiring a coach, I really got a lot of value from it. And that's what really led me to becoming a coach and ultimately landing here in the channel and working with entrepreneurs. My favorite to work with is that small business owner that's looking to grow the business without them in it and being able to scale it and build a very formidable and winning team around them.
You know
And
what's fun about this conversation is that I've gotten to ride shotgun on this journey, and watch from
mhm.
through the same windshield. And we got to trade riffs, right? And share thoughts for many, many years on the topics. Just really like you and I talking about the Masters on Sunday. Like we'd
Mhm.
recap something new or some discovery and have interesting conversations. But what the audience doesn't really know about you, and that only I would know after 40 years of brotherhood, is that prior to the launch of TWR, you were a music instructor early on outside of it. And I know, much like when people come to lessons, it's almost like when they go get a haircut. I talk to the person who cuts my hair all the time. I go, how many stories did you hear this week? How many life lessons did you have to share? How much, because there are certain industries where people become comfortable, and not with everybody, but when somebody has masterful skills at rapport building and they're as
Mhm.
equally good at listening as they are maybe offering the right words at the right time. You were developing that from the time you were teaching at Garden State Music at 17 years old or
Yeah.
16, whatever that was. So I've had a front row seat to this masterful rapport building and the genuine interest that you have had in people's success and finding people's outcomes. So while while TWR may be a dozen years old or so, you've really been coaching for 40 years, at least in my book,
Yeah.
you know?
That's
And I'm
that
sure
is
if this
true.
thing were 6 hours, you could tell us 50 stories about the areas where you've reached out to help and coach. But my favorite one is when you had a longtime student call you from a car dealer and you just knew he was about to get hit pretty hard from the New Jersey car dealership. And you went down there to sort of stand in and help and guide and get him to a better spot. But this was because of what, at that point, maybe a 15 to 19-year rapport you built with this somebody. So
Mhm.
this guy he'd become a friend, but he started out as a client and you were vested beyond pentatonic scales and chords and riffs. And this
Mm.
is what you brought. So watching you bring all of that to the official business results coaching, and watching you go through the Robbins stuff, and seeing you do your, so-called 10,000 hours there, and the countless different clients and grinds. Did you feel a transition? Did it feel natural to you? Does this feel like you've always been doing this in a certain way?
Yeah, I think I've always been vested into the success of others. I
Yep.
think I've always enjoyed watching people succeed. And to have a little part in that, I think is always something that drove me. I mean,
Yeah.
from back in the days of teaching guitar, I think that really is where I did the 10,000 hours. I think the skill set there is very similar to the coaching in that, making someone else one-on-one feel comfortable in their own skin, I think is really the ultimate skill to have. And I think I built that and worked that muscle during those years of teaching guitar, from
Yeah.
Garden State Music to my basement to starting my own music school. Getting that other person, because they're always real nervous when they're in the room with you. They don't know how to play guitar and you do. So they're
Yeah.
a little bit hesitant and have a bit of stage fright. So I think it was always about bringing out. To me, education isn't about putting in, but it's about bringing out. So bringing out their X factor in the way they played guitar. But
Hmm.
ultimately, I think the skill set of making someone else feel comfortable in a room is the skill to have. And the coaching, by the time I got there, I had to do most of it, of course, on the phone, not face to face. Was a pretty easy transition from that point because I'm naturally curious and I
Yeah.
like to learn. So hearing about what makes not so much what people think, but how they think has been a real driver
Yeah.
in me doing the coaching.
You talk about this getting out, right? Getting out rather than putting in. And I think it's a distinction in the coaching. Oh, my camera's going a little haywire here. Sorry, buddy. Let me just get us readjusted. This is what I get for monkeying with this stuff while I'm recording. I'll edit this out. Stand by. Oh, come on, Vic. What are you doing? I'll tweak this up. Oh my gosh. Why did I even monkey with this?
There you go.
All right, we're good now. Okay. All right, here we go. This getting out thing that you just said, um, one of the lines that, you've laid down often is, I've got questions, you got answers. Similarly, you've said questions are the answers. And I think as you sort of think about what you did musically, there are so many parallels. And in prepping for our conversation tonight, I spent a half hour just staring off into the yard thinking about 40 years in this journey and all the correlation between the bricks in the road that you went down. And I've never heard you tell me that the music approach was as you described it, even though we've been talking about this for 40 years, but I could see it because Lord knows, I heard many of those lessons from the other room. And I get it now. I really get it. But I know that this is the coaching approach. And we've often said, hey, this is the distinction between coaching and consulting.
Mm.
You hire a consultant and you're expecting somebody to walk through the door, look at your business, and tell you exactly what to do. And sometimes it doesn't feel great. And you say, hey, and maybe you had a consultant back at the academy many times that said, hey, coach, or hey, Tony, you know, auto payment, credit cards, debit cards, and everybody freaked out. We're going to lose half the students, right? But you had to buy in. You believed it. You had to buy in. That was a told to do versus hey, what do you think you could do to guarantee your cash flow rate? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
sort of, and minimize the work and collections and things like that, and getting people there. How important is that in the coaching? Pulling out, getting out versus depositing.
I think it has everything to do with the buy-in. I think if you are only putting information in and you're expecting that to be regurgitated out, the coaching is very much like that. It's not about it giving advice. It's about asking questions to find out what the problem is. I always say I don't want to offer a solution to a problem I don't know exists.
Mm-hmm.
But the last thing I'm going to do is tell somebody how to run their business. I could tell you what other clients have done and who I've worked with and what their path was like. But the coaching is a little bit different because we know psychologically that when you're told to do something that you should have thought of yourself or that you really knew to do, the subconscious mind actually resists actually doing it. So on one level, that person's right telling you what to do, but on another level, you're kind of beating yourself up for not doing it. And you'd be surprised how often people go, wow, that's really good advice. And then you ask them if they used it and they didn't. And when you ask them why and you really dig underneath, you find out that they were a little bit resistant to doing those things that someone else told them. So I just believe that everybody's creative, resourceful, and whole. And I think that's a premise in the coaching for us coaches who understand that premise, that when you go in assuming that this person knows their life better than I do, and me giving them advice based off of what I did or what I would suggest doing wouldn't be very beneficial for their life or business. But in asking the right questions, and this is the science side of it, asking the right questions to direct their focus, is the fastest path to them kind of solving their own challenges and giving next steps and things that they want to actually try. So to me, coaching is just about accelerating that thought process that's already going on in our own minds, and then having somebody to hold you accountable to actually doing it. And like I say, I'm just the hair club for men story where he says, I'm not just the owner. I'm also a client. I mean, a coach without a coach is not walking the talk. So I get a lot from my coach when I work with her weekly of some of the things that what we call scotomas or limiting beliefs, things that I don't see.
What's a scotoma for the audience?
It's just, a blind spot.
Okay.
I think there's all of us have them, and it's hard for us to see it. Maybe the overall premise for coaching for me, because I'm a very unlikely candidate for the role. I never pictured myself becoming like an executive coach or something. It was tour the world, date supermodels, make millions of dollars. That was the goal.
Yeah.
But in my journey, I got so much value of having the people around me that were able to help me that it seemed like something that I really wanted to pursue when I was asked. And as I got more and more into the science of it, I started understanding the real value that it could have for people. And fortunately, me getting into coaching when I did wasn't about coaching the broken. That was like the last thing that companies did. Let's bring in an executive coach and see what happens.
See if we can't save this person. I've seen it.
So,
hey, back to the music business goes, as Meatloaf said with Jim Steinman, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. So
that's right. That's right.
So we'll let the audience decide which one got left out, but I think we all know what it was. But blind spots. Mm-hmm. Gosh, you said we all have them, and boy, we all have them. And I think that I have the same and equal thirst for personal development, but I'd be damned if I don't find new blind spots all the time. One of the things I've been working on personally, not only, personally and professionally, but I've been working on it, and it's a key phrase that everybody says. And now when I hear it said, and or if I say it, I literally want to incinerate my ears and eyeballs. It's, hey, if I were you, I'd do this. Man, that rubs me such the wrong way. And I don't mind so much when people say it to me, depending on where it's coming from and where it is in the conversation. But I hate myself in that character. And so, and especially for anybody out there raising kids, I mean, what Tony described early on, my comment was going to be, you've just described adolescence. It's good for you. You heard it. You were told not to do it, but you resisted it at all costs, right?
Hmm.
And it's funny how far that adolescence goes on into your adult life. Because really, when you really think about it and break it down, isn't it just a continuance of that adolescent behavior? Right? Somebody's going to tell me what to do. I know it's good, but it's not my idea. And somehow emotionally, I can't process it that way. I mean, is there any connection there? Have you ever thought about it like
Well,
that?
you know, they say a jar can't read its own label,
Yeah.
and I think that's the best part about having a coach is having that person reflect back to me what it is that I'm saying and what's
Yeah.
coming across. Because as you've said many a times, the words you speak are the ones people hear.
Yeah. It's true.
Um, but what was the specific question there?
Do you think there's anything to the continuance of adolescent behavior? You raise your kids, you tell them, hey, don't do this, do that, do this. You know it's best for them. They don't, either they think you're a fool or they just don't get it, or they know it, but they're going to do it anyway. And it's almost it's a similar trait to when you try to influence people. If you tell them what to do, unless you have a military background where that's trained and ingrained, the natural behavior is to try to resist it because it wasn't your idea.
Hey, one of my favorite phrases really is, maturity is when all your mirrors turn into windows. I think
Mm-hmm.
Henry David Thoreau said that. And I think
Yeah.
every day that goes by, it means more and more to me as an individual too. Because when you start reacting, when you stop reacting to everything that's around you, you get a much clearer picture of where you sit in all of it. In other words, it's not all about you.
Yeah.
So the buzzword these days, of course, is emotional intelligence and
Yeah.
EQ. The IQ gets you the job, the talent, the skills, the knowledge, the piece of paper, the studying, the test taking. But ultimately, these higher level jobs and being a business owner yourself, what really keeps you there or keeps that success growing is your ability to grow as an individual. And it's the EQ side of things. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, when we're younger, it's go, go, go. We have all the answers. We know what we want. We think we know what we want and how to get there. But as we get older, we start realizing that the world doesn't owe us anything. And it's really, you got to create your own path. You got to make
Mm-hmm.
your own success. And building networks and working well with others. I always say when somebody says, hey, we're having trouble with this person, I say, get me their kindergarten report card.
Hmm.
Because if the box is checked that says works well with others, then I know we have somebody that's coachable. If it's not, and I know I'm joking, but we know those
Yeah.
people who seemingly can't work with others very well. This is just an aptitude thing when it comes to emotional intelligence. And whether it's self-awareness, when we're younger, we're not very self-aware.
Yeah.
For sure, we can't self-regulate. We really, when we're in a bad mood, we're in a bad mood. We can't get out of it. As we grow older and we become more mature, we're able to self-regulate. We know a little bit more about ourselves. So I think it's something that always comes with age.
You
But
mind if
it
we
is the
unpack that?
old-fashioned word is maturity.
You mind? Yeah. You mind if we unpack that a little bit? Because you've got me thinking. Um, what is it that, in your view, that you've seen through coaching thousands of people? What is it that gets folks? And I don't know if it's even the right question to them, but what is it about that self-regulation that people can't get to? And I do even understand and recognize even the most successful self-regulated people have their moments. And it's not
Mm-hmm.
about those moments. It's more about all of the other moments. But there are many people, some of which whom we both know, um, despite knowing how they respond and feeling crappy about it afterwards, the behavior always comes through. What's at the root of this stuff from your view and from your experience? Because I know you've likely coached hundreds of people like that.
Well, I've never worked with anybody who didn't think they had a high level of self-awareness or
Okay.
ability to self-regulate, or that
Yeah.
they were intrinsically motivated, or
Yeah.
that they were great at building networks until the challenges come up. And I think it's through
Okay.
the challenges that we really find out who we are. So, to me, I think you have the opportunity to learn about self-regulation and self-awareness in every aspect of your life. When I'm coaching somebody on skills training, like the neuro-linguistic
Yeah.
programming and what you're listening for and body language type stuff, it always comes back around the same thing again, is that this stuff you could use it on your friends and your family to practice it,
Hmm.
because the triggers, these are the things that really get under your skin, that have you overreact. Getting to know somebody is also getting to know what really not motivates them, but motivates them to some sort of action. Sometimes those actions are empowering, and sometimes they're quite dispowering.
Mm.
And holding up a mirror to clients in those moments is the best way for them to start understanding where they fall in that, say, 1 to 5 scale of being, emotionally intelligent in the area of self-regulation or self-awareness.
Interesting. Interesting. It's always a little puzzling to me about and it is right. The people that have the hardest time self regulating are very in tune to it. They know it. They don't like that about themselves, yet they find themselves in that position repeatedly. And I scratch my head and say, if you know this is a spot you don't want to be in, the proverbial charging, 10 miles an hour ahead into a brick wall, leading with your nose. If you know the outcome you get from that, why
Mm-hmm.
continue to charge forward with your nose toward the brick wall?
That's a
Yet,
great question. You know what it is?
no, I
It's
don't.
that they're getting a benefit from that behavior. And I find that most people who don't have the ability to self-regulate really aren't self-aware enough to understand that's what's happening. And I think it was like the NLP training, it was the coach training I did with Robbins, that, whether it was mental and emotional fitness, that you start learning what your triggers are. And as you learn what your triggers are, you learn to adapt to them and use them. We talk about, business, and we talk about sports all the time, Vic.
Yeah.
But I remember, I think it was John Rahm who was famous for throwing his club into the lake with a bad shot or breaking it over his
Yeah.
knee.
Only all of them.
Yeah, yeah, but a lot of these folks have kind of these mental and emotional coaches that kind of train them not to necessarily not become emotional, but to use their emotions and channel their emotions in a positive way. So some people who are self-regulating, who stop yelling because they're used to not yelling, but still show it on their face. We both know people like that, where they're passive aggressive with their tone of voice. It's still there,
Yeah.
but they think that they've actually fixed it. So I think it's in those real moments where you find out what a person's triggers are, that you can actually coach them through it. But like I said, a jar can't read its own label. So it's
Yeah.
extremely difficult to know what your triggers are and to know how to navigate around those to get the outcome that you really want.
As we talked about in Lucky 13, and we talked about many, many times, this whole EQ side, self awareness, EQ, and also what's the um, personal development, the most
Mm-hmm.
important part of leadership skills and influencing people. CEOs have to know, they have to have so many abilities. You have to have the ability to sort of rise above and to see things from 35,000 feet and have areas, but they also have to have the ability to be able to drop down at anywhere in the organization, ask the right questions to get the right things going, and know enough of the details, or at least lead the witness well enough to know the questions and the things to ask, so that the experts can come up with something. Um, it, this whole component of EQ is so important when you're leading teams. Without it, you're going to be a horrible leader. EQ also requires you to have an awareness of not only your own state, but the state of others.
Mm-hmm.
And often requires a ton of empathy and understanding how a person got to that particular spot so you can help them manage to a better place. What's your
I always like
experience
that
there?
distinction there, empathy versus sympathy.
Mm-hmm.
There's kind of a difference where sympathy is more about feeling bad for or resonating with and getting caught up in it. And when you're
Mm-hmm.
working with people all the time, where they're working with somebody who's very close to them that's struggling and they just can't seem to get them out of the funk, it's because they're too close to the patient, if you
Yeah.
will. So they have sympathy for. Empathy is understanding the emotional makeup of others. And you're right, from a leadership standpoint, knowing what drives people or what motivates them to action is truly the number one skill in life and business. And that level of empathy is about understanding what's going on with that other person or being able to read a room. Great salespeople are great at reading the room just
Yeah.
from hearing the tone of voice of the other person talking. They don't even realize that they have these skills until you take them from an area where they're, say they feel they don't have a resource, like with their spouse. And then you show them an area of their life where they're very resourceful.
Mm-hmm.
And then you take that area of their life where they're very resourceful and bring it over to where they feel they're not resourceful. And they actually have a system of understanding. Like if you're in the room with a sales guy and he's trying to close a deal, he's reading that other person's facial expressions. They're reading the tone of voice, the words they speak. They know when to listen and when to talk. And then they go home and they forget all the skills that they
Guilty as
already have.
charged. Guilty as
So yeah, a
charged.
lot of times in the coaching, what I find is you can only build on success. It's not about building on failure. Coaching's easy. Just continue doing more of what's working and less of what isn't. Hey, where else does this show up in your life when somebody's challenged with something? And then take in that area of their life where they are resourceful and plug it in where they feel that they're not is a
Yeah.
game changer. And that would be a great example. A salesperson that doesn't make the sale at home, but can make it in the office all day long. They're not using the same skills that they really have because they don't even know that they're transferable.
I don't know the name of the person because of the confidentiality in your work. But I remember you telling me a story about a one-word shift. And I would like you to share it. And it's I am versus am I.
Yeah.
And,
One of my
let's leave out
favorites.
the names to protect the innocent. But I think this is such a powerful story. And I think about this in simplicity all the time because when I think about a spot where I'm needing to make a shift, I often recognize I don't need to travel 500 miles for it. It's going to be something small that's going to change, the complete trajectory of where I'm going. So would you share, to the extent you can, the story, and the shift and what the outcomes were? And
Yeah, I was working with a CEO that was running a pretty big data company. And I remember being on the phone with him fairly early in the relationship. And I think he told me he was in his mid 50s at the time and he had a great run. But the bottom line was he was about to be ousted from his own organization. And through the dialogue, what I found out is that the board was really looking for that shout, the manifesto from the rooftops type of leader, that hard driver that was really going to drive sales and really grow the company. And this just wasn't that guy. And I always say, you don't have to become something you're not, just become more of who you already are. So getting this gentleman to become something that he wasn't and to be this browbeater, this guy shouting the manifesto
yeah,
from the rooftops or from the mountaintops wasn't going to happen. So I was asking him, and he said, hey, listen, I'm dead man walking. Like the board is going to oust me out of my own company fairly soon. And he was kind of saying, hey, but I've had a good run. I'm at a good place in my life. I think maybe it's time for me to maybe hang it up. But I kind of sensed that wasn't really what he wanted,
yeah. He was trying to let
and
himself down easily.
yeah, a little bit. And I understand that, and maybe he did have a lot of great things that he could look forward to in the next chapter, but I sensed he still wasn't done at his own company. And I said, what is the thought that's knocking you out of heaven? What's keeping you up at night? And he said, well, it's a question. And I said, great. What's the question? And it was, am I the guy to take this company to the next level? And I said, and when you ask that question, what comes up? And he said, well, clearly I'm not, because over the last 3 years, we've been pretty flat and the board has been on me, and, the numbers don't lie. And for the most part, he was really questioning his ability to lead this organization to that next level. And I said, the strongest force in the human personality is the need to remain consistent with how it identifies itself. And this is a great term and phrase that I learned working with Tony Robbins, because the identity belief is probably the strongest held belief. I'm a be me, everybody sees themselves. I'm a procrastinator, or I am this. But I told him that the two most powerful words in any language were I am. And I thought he had them backwards. Am I the guy to take this company to the next business?
Yeah.
That question is asking, like, why am I fat? Well, because I eat too much. I don't exercise. I'm lazy. That question really brings up nothing but poor answers. So the questions that you ask yourself are very important. And the two most important words in an identity belief, when somebody says I am, you want to really pay attention, because they're about to give you a lot of good information about how they see themselves. And that's an identity belief, is just that. It's how you define yourself to yourself. So I asked him, I said, if we were to switch those two words and get it right, the two most powerful words in any language being I am, what comes up? And he said, well, I am the person to take this company to the next level. I said, exactly. I said, what's true about that? And he really lit up, and it was on a phone call, and I could hear it in his voice and in the tone. He's like, I built this effing company. Yeah. Like, I hired everybody who's here, and I did it the way that I do it as a leader, which he believed was more of a servant leader, somebody that was good at listening, building relationships, all the things we know are extremely value, and the EQ side of it, this guy had it. But because the numbers were down and 3 years flat, I think he lost a bit of confidence in himself. But just that one little distinction and switching those two words really lit him up. And I don't know where he's at now, or if he's still the CEO of that company. It's going back a ways.
He was on 60 Minutes. He's the homeless guy who got a free haircut. No, I'm just kidding.
That's right. But, what happened? No. Well, he got ousted. He's gone.
No, but I do remember that there was a turnaround from the board perspective as time went on. I would say, hey, how's that guy doing? You go, oh, my God, he's on fire. The board's turning around. They're loving what he's doing. So it was an interesting thing. But my point there is just that there's these small shifts, and I like the how you phrase it. In that identity. What did you call it? The identity what?
It's an identity belief.
An identity belief.
The belief structures that we have. I don't know if there's one that's more important or impactful to somebody's success than how they view themselves. So an identity belief is exactly that, how we view ourselves to ourselves.
If you don't believe it, no one else is.
That's right.
No one else is. And, it's interesting. There's so much to that. If you have this identity belief, but you're real about that persona or that skill set. Listen, I can run around telling everybody I'm the next in line to be considered the great virtuoso next to Segovia.
Mm-hmm.
But I know if I picked up one of these guitars behind me, I don't play like that. So I can go tell everybody and have that belief, but I'd be delusional, right? So now that wouldn't say that if I wanted to make that happen, there would be some path that would be a lifelong dedication, the same 10 or 12 hours a day that he did over decades and decades, that, one could at least strive for that, right? Then at least you have this belief structure backed by the work, backed by the facts, backed by the effort. And the reason I say that is there is no better confidence builder than skill.
Mm-hmm.
Skill and knowledge, right? When you have real skill and real knowledge, this identity belief becomes easier. It becomes easier. And when you think of, I think about Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was not a big believer. Every time he did his things, he had the 60-foot wide and the 25-foot screens and stuff came on and off, but it wasn't, he wasn't a PowerPoint guy.
Mm-hmm.
He was able to tell his story because over decades and decades, he told his story. He was comfortable with the information, the fact patterns, all the things that happen there. So if you have this identity crisis, you possibly could have all the skills and knowledge, but it could be a crisis of confidence. There could be something else getting in there.
Yeah. We want to step away from delusions of grandeur, for sure.
Totally.
I mean, without the work, nothing gets done. And you're right. Whether it's 10 years or 10,000 hours, you have to do the work to have the skill. There's no doubt. But really, a limiting belief, a belief is just a feeling of certainty about what something means.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, with identity beliefs or any beliefs of any time, it's really about questioning where you have that data.
Yeah.
Because here I am talking to a guy that built a company from the ground up. I remember him saying it was 12 years ago that he had started the company. So, and he was very successful at doing exactly that. He clearly didn't need me to help him get out of what he was trying to do with his company, help him sell more. It was really a bit of crisis of confidence in forgetting about who he really was.
Yeah.
And, whether it's just, an easy thing of switching the two words or really just being able to listen what was going on in his head. It was really just getting him to buy back into the success that he already created.
Yeah,
and I remember him saying that too. I hired everybody here. I started this effing company. I did it this way. I handpicked everybody that's been here for this long.
Yeah, he had to remind himself of that.
He started believing the fake news, I think, of what people were telling him was the problem. And from a leadership perspective, that can be the kiss of death.
Oh, it is. And it's very easy for that to creep up on you.
Mm-hmm.
When at some point, whether it be your board or your boss, the confidence of the leaders on the job you do is paramount to how you feel about what you contribute. And if you allow that to creep into your psyche, you're freaking doomed. Pardon me. I've had so many people in my life that have been let go from jobs call me with their tail between their legs. And I would always say, F those bastards. Mm-hmm. They'd be like, what? I go, do not let this moment define your skills, your capability, the contributions you've made, who you are. There are tens of thousands of companies out there. The next one will appreciate you and your contributions. Do not let this moment define who you are. And you kind of you got to jar them. You got to shake them and remind them. And then through your, guidance, what was the last project that you did that was a giant home run? Oh, they get into it. They tell you the story. When was the last time you helped somebody succeed and get promoted? Almost every time they have a story. Great. What fresh new ideas that you had that made the company great at any time in your career and life? And all of a sudden you see this recharge happening, right? They have all the answers. You just keep, you draw it out of them. So really for anybody listening that might go, holy crap, some of this stuff resonates with me. You have to really create this identity for yourself. Coach, I want to transition. You have this thing that we call the Lightboard, where you sort of draw on the screen. So let's take a couple seconds here and transition the setup, and then come back to the Lightboard. And I want you to give the audience a little bit of an experience, like a mini session that you might do with somebody where you explain some of these principles and coaching. Does that sound cool?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Let's run to the Lightboard Studio.
That's great. Is this in the west wing of the studio?
It is, yes, at the headquarters here on the Jersey Shore at TWR.
Perfect. Hey, so this is something I love. You get to do this with a lot of organizations, and I thought it'd be cool to give the audience a little bit of a taste. So they would say, we talked about some of the way you think and how you think about this stuff where you're focusing, but often you get on with groups and you walk them through things in this, what we call the Lightboard Studio. So What are some of the things you go through with these organizations and explain that help them understand, their organizations better?
Well, first of all, the Lightboard is kind of a pretty cool way. So instead of turning around and you guys having to stare at the back of my head while I write on a whiteboard, I can turn around and maybe draw something on the Lightboard, which gives a little bit of a visual. And what's really good about having the Lightboard is that I don't have to predetermine what we're going to discuss. In other words, one of the premises in coaching is you're the agenda.
Yeah.
So when I'm working with sales teams or leaders of organizations, a lot of times things come up in real time. So if I were to whip out a PowerPoint, I'd be talking about, again, potentially a solution to a problem that I don't know exists. So a lot of times people will tell me, or maybe something comes up. And one of the ones that seems to come up pretty often is the focus maybe in sales. So we'll look at this from a sales perspective. And I'm working with a team of salesmen and women, and perhaps their sales leader, or a leader of any kind. But let's just say that the Lightboard is a way that in real time we can discuss some of the challenges and maybe come up with some solutions together in real time. So this is one that I get pretty often that always seems to be good. And I always say, hey, you don't have to give me a name, but let's just talk about, and I want you to think about the people who are in the top 10% of your organization. And if with sales, you know who they are. Those are your high achievers. These are the people at, hitting the President's Club year after year. These are your top producers. And it usually makes up, let's just call it about, 7 to 10% of any organization. The next is pretty much that 70% of middle of the road folks. These are people that can go either way. They can go, you're coaching them up, you're training them, you're trying to get them in that top bracket, but occasionally they also slip down into the bottom 20%. And one of the biggest distinctions that I think people make is I'll ask that sales leader, when you're coaching a team of people, where does most of your mental and emotional energy go? And without question, all the time, they always say to the bottom 20%. So here we are in a situation where we're trying to build an organization through sales, and the sales leaders' attention and focus is constantly on the bottom 20%. Working with Tony Robbins, I learned fairly early on that if you were in the bottom 20% in any department, you were going to be top graded out. You had about 18 months to get it together. You'd be put on a PIP, from the corporate term. I don't know if that's what they called it there. But for the most part, they had this, criteria based off of numbers that would tell them where you were performing in the organization. And if you ended up in the bottom 20% for too long, you were out of the organization. So what I've found is that success usually comes in an organization when we focus on the top 10%. Yes, we want to coach people up. We want to get people to that next level. We want to train them. But 9 times out of 10, the best energy that you could put is towards that top 10%. But the irony here is that most sales leaders, for instance, were always the number one sales guy. And a lot of people will always come back and they'll make their top sales guy the sales leader. And they don't know why they don't get the best results. And a lot of this has to do with exactly this, the focus on the bottom instead of the top.
So, it's interesting because I thought you were going to go to the 70%. That would be in alignment with, let's say, the book Good to Great.
Mm-hmm.
It would also be in alignment with a story I heard. It's very long, but the short story is that many, many years ago, I met a guy who was in charge of customer satisfaction, and they were doing exactly as you described. This was at a carrier, big one, AT&T. They would always focus on all the customers that just kiboshed them in the surveys, and they were focused on how do we get to 20% up, because they thought there was going to be a direct correlation in retention and revenue. If I can get that 20 into the 70, God forbid I get them up the curve. time after time, they spent all their money and effort down there. Nothing happened. And so they found out that, you had to give them this outstanding experience. So they were trying, and in the 10%, they were pretty safe, but they weren't safe in the 70, because in the 70, they'd go to Verizon for a penny a minute. If I can get good service and the stuff, my phone worked, and there was nothing exceptional about my experience. So, but maybe it's different. Maybe it's different customer to performer, because I can see that if you've got a sales performer in the top 10%, now that I talk this through and think it through with you, that what's it for them to close one more enterprise deal each? But training that 70 to close that enterprise deal could be a really laborious task. Not saying you don't have, pardon me, plans to coach people up so you can get, turn that 10 to 20 up top, right? That would be outstanding. But as I think it through, what are some of the things you see people focus on in that 10% as examples? So, yeah, I'm going to focus on the 10%. What's been the dialogue? What do they focus on to get the better results out of that group?
Let's see. Well, when it comes to top 10%, we talk about best practices. We talk about their ability to understand the market. I think it's that talent of skills and emotional intelligence. That's kind of the other formula that's often spoken about, in that you have sales skills, you have sales skills plus job skills, times, of course, personal skills. So if you're in your job skills and you got a 5, and you got a 5 in your sales skills, so you have 5 and a 5, but your people skills is only a 2, well, then we only have a force multiplier that's really going to bring us up to a very small number of potential, right? I mean, 10 times 2 is a 20. Yeah. But if we take somebody that has, say, a sales skill of 3 and, say, a job skills of 4, but their people skills, their interdependent relationship skills, their ability to build rapport, create trust, if those skills are an 8, then that force multiplier is much greater, and the number and their impact is bigger. So yes, train or pain. It's always about training the middle 70% that we want to bring up, for sure. But I think that if there was a number one skill in business and life, it's influence. Whether you're selling a product or a service, or whether you're a leader selling a vision or a mission, or a parent, right, selling your values. At the end of the day, it's your ability to influence. So the difference maker in the 10%, they seem to have not just the closing skills and the job skills, but they also have the people skills, where they develop that trust with the client, where they're able to get them to sell. It's not just about bigger deals either. Some people in the top 10% aren't selling enterprise deals just for the large, but they're just really good at, bringing deals together, that making things happen. And so I would say that from the coaching standpoint, we focus more on those interpersonal relationship skills and those skills of influence that the top 10% have 9 times out of 10, and created best practices for developing those skills. Cool. But still, the greatest focus is on your top 10% and what are they doing right.
Nice. All right. Well, we could unpack this for another hour. Why don't we erase this one? So we're going to give people little teaser examples here. What's something else you use this Lightboard for on an interactive basis? This is cool. It looks like you're wiping air,
Yes. Well,
you need you need your own guy with a bottle and a squeegee.
Yeah, well, and I had to really work hard at writing things backwards. That was just the skill that you have to develop. For sure, with doing this. No, this actually reverses it, so it makes it very easy. Yeah. And depending on what it is that I'm working, I could stand to the side so you could see better. But I would say, when it comes to skills of influence, for instance, that's kind of that next level. And a lot of times when I'm working with leaders who are running organizations large and small, or that solopreneur that's trying to build up a team, I say there's only three things you have to focus on when it comes to not just skills of influence, but being a great leader. And what is that exactly? So I like to say it's kind of a three-legged stool. And the three-legged stool is this. This is the stool, and these are the three legs. And if I had to, I know it's not necessarily.
Yeah, we can see it fine.
Yeah. Is what are the three things that hold up this, a leader that makes them great? And in any organization, it's always the same. Number one, psychological safety. A great leader, a great influencer is somebody that's able to create a high level of psychological safety on the team and the organization. That is that we want to really create and instill in people a level of creativity, innovation, failing forward, to really go for it. If we're going to be successful, we're going to, as a company, as an organization, we're going to have to really build up that level of impact that each individual can have. So what is psychological safety? That means that you are free and you feel comfortable bringing challenges and ideas to the table without feeling that somehow you'll be reprimanded or brought down to be less. So great leaders.
Take a half a step to the left, if you would. I want to make sure you're in frame. Nope, the other way. Your left. Yeah,
that's
right
actually
there.
my
Right
right.
there.
That's what this whole thing is about.
Because you're mirrored, right?
Yes. So
right there, Coach.
So psychological safety is probably the number one challenge that I see within organizations where the leader lacks an ability to build that level of influence, that creativity. They're always saying, hey, I just don't have the right people, in the jobs, but yet they show up all the time, not really giving this level of psychological safety to their people so that they can communicate on that level.
Do you mind if I comment along the way, or would you like me to
Yeah,
wait till the other
come on, bring it on.
I mean, I have so much to say about PS and psychological safety. Boy, is this missing almost everywhere I go.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you call it out as the number one challenge, I am not surprised, because I could tell you, especially as you get into the bigger cultures where people are, in a big bureaucracy, or they're jockeying for a promotion, or they want that next job more than the job they have. Mm-hmm. We've had this conversation for 10 years. The culture of these companies create no psychological safety. Mm-hmm. And there is no experimentation at all. As a matter of fact, you miss on a project for whatever reason, you're done.
Yeah.
You're done.
Yeah.
Now, not a small project that's, somewhat recoverable, but the bigger you are, the more money's at stake, the bigger projects go. It takes the creativity out. So, I mean, geez, we can do a whole episode on this, but an amazing distinction, an amazing call out for the listeners here. If you are a leader, if there's any way for you to stare out your window in your office and ask yourself the question, how safe do my people feel in their jobs? Right? Of course, they can't feel safe for lack of performance. But if I show up and I meet the objectives and I do the job and I have a smile on my face, and yeah, I'm going to swing a few times and miss, but that's okay, because Hall of Famers go to the Hall of Fame with a 378 batting average.
No, 300.
Okay. Well,
78 would be over the top.
Yeah. So you're in there, right? Because it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's hard. And even the greatest golfers may only win 5, 6, 7 times in 25 years, or once. Right? Mm-hmm. So if you're a leader out there, ask, what is it I am doing? Because this is the number one thing. Without this, people operate in this fear factor, or a fear factory. They won't take chances. They won't rise things up to you quick enough so you can help them resolve something, because they don't have the psychological safety. Yeah. Like, shit, I better try and fix it. And then it gets worse and worse and worse. And then you have this big problem. So continue on.
The bottom line, too, is from a leadership perspective, the number one challenge in leadership is getting work done through others, right?
Yeah,
Because
totally.
if you're doing the work, then you're probably not the leader. I know there's work that leaders do, but if you're going to build the pyramids, you're going to need somebody else to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, without psychological safety, that level of innovation and confidence goes way down. And without it, you're not going to be competitive. So creating an atmosphere, an environment, a culture of psychological safety becomes key. The second leg on the stool is what I call inclusion. I coach a lot of people at different levels in organizations, and a lot of the feedback that I get is they really don't see the connection between what they do for the organization and the ultimate goal and the vision. And what I'm constantly doing is helping them make a connection to what they do every day as being valued by the organization. So from a leadership perspective, yes, you have to know exactly what everybody in your organization does and how that connects the dots to the greater whole, to your vision. And at the end of the day, a feeling of inclusion and feeling like what you do brings value to the organization and is extremely impactful to the long-term success becomes key. So a leader that can create a level of inclusion within the atmosphere and the culture of their organization is going to thrive.
Yeah.
And ones who don't have trouble with attrition, high turnover, low morale, and all the things that go along with people just, kind of cashing the check and punching out at 5 o'clock. Creating a level of inclusion has people thinking about the business and what they do for the business, even when they're not on the clock. And the greatest leaders that I've worked with are not only good at creating an atmosphere of psychological safety, but also making others feel extremely included in the solution.
No comment there. You nailed it. Anything I would say would repeat, but that's detrimental.
Yeah, and the fourth
To
leg
be
of the
not
stool.
included, rather, is
What's
detrimental to
that?
the org. To be not included is
Yes.
detrimental to the organization. I'm
Yeah.
finishing my thought there. What's CF?
Yeah. Yeah. And the last thing is a compelling future. A compelling future within the team, within the organization. People will stick around if they feel not just that they're getting the next role or the next paycheck or the next title, but they have to see a path and a trajectory for their ascension within in the opportunity to give even more impact to the organization. Because at best, what we want from our people is that they don't want the role and the title just for the money and the power, but they want the role and the title to have more impact towards our goal as a leader. So by creating a path for people to have a compelling future, it becomes, without any one of these legs, as you know, the leadership will crumble.
Yeah.
And people will not see them. But it's literally three things to focus on. The compelling future doesn't necessarily have to just mean, like I said, a path of ascension within the organization, but really it could be about learning. I always say,
Mm-hmm.
progress is happiness. Ultimately, if people feel that they're growing in the organization, whether it's leadership development or skills training, that the company really has their back and wants to
Okay.
see them grow. And I remember us talking about it all the time, but that kind of that saying is, yeah, what if we train our people and they leave,
Yeah.
right? But the real question is, what if we don't train them and they stay, right? So whether it's a clear path to the top, because not everybody can be the president of an organization. Not everybody is going to be the SVP of sales. Not everybody else is going to see the C-suite in their career based off of what they do and the impact they have. But their value is still intrinsic to us as leaders to actually meet those objectives. So the compelling future is as valuable as any of the other two because it makes people feel like they're growing. And we know if you're not growing, you're dying
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
anything.
It's funny.
So,
These things have a compounding effect too,
mm,
because another way to draw this from a different angle, not won't have the same meaning, because you draw this as if one of these legs go over the stool topples, and that's a great visual. But if you had this in a concentric circle, 3 arrows, and you started
mhm,
out with psychological safety, and down at 4:00 you went to inclusion, and then at 8:00 you went to what did CF stand for again?
Compelling
Right,
future.
compelling future. As these things sort of, the flywheel's going to spin faster for that person. So if you make it, I have this psychological safety, and I drip down to 4:00, and I get to the inclusion, and then I get to seeing a compelling future. That's going to feed into more psychological safety, which is going to make the behaviors of that person who works there stronger, better, more courageous. To your point, they're going to be thinking about solutions when they go home.
Yeah, well, interdependence,
Yeah.
all the things. Yes, a three-legged stool. That's why without one, this thing
Yeah.
falls. But it only works if they're all also equal.
Yeah.
And to our point that we always joke, 6-minute abs, that's impossible. This thing wouldn't work as a flywheel ever.
Exactly.
But yes, of course, the visual, and why I really like structures, obviously. And again, in real time, when you're coaching with a team, it's less is more.
Yeah.
They don't want death by PowerPoint. They don't want to be spoken at. I like creating more of a dialogue in the coaching, and even in the group format too, because the pitching and catching is where the magic is. And like I always say, the coaching happens between the calls. It doesn't happen while we're on the calls or in the training. It's what you do with it afterwards that proves your worth, either as a leader or as a top salesperson or a great, impactful employee, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, what's great about this is that organizations can spend a day on each one of these things, really unpacking what is it that does or does not create psychological safety. What is it that does or does not can create a work environment of inclusion? What is it that does or does not demonstrate a compelling future? They'll have the answers. These are certainly the questions. And you're right, it's simple. And they'll know.
Yeah, absolutely.
They'll know. If you get enough people in the room, and if you're honest with each other, and if you're not just, you're not just feeding. I'll leave the names out. Why don't you erase this so we can see you? I just watched the CEO of a very big company there was a little clip of a speech this person was giving, and said the number one reason that companies fail, pardon me, was because of bureaucracy. From the person running the company, maybe the largest bureaucracy in America.
Yeah.
Completely disconnected, but understandably a giant organization. And really, it's funny, I consider this person one of the greatest leaders that I've read about, come across, worked with. But yet when I heard that, I didn't disagree, but I just said, wow, completely cut off from the prisoners, so to speak, But interesting. Hey, let's take a pause here, go back to the other background, and get back. Let's go to the other studio, as they say.
Yes.
Yeah.
The other studio.
All right, here we are back in Studio A. This is good.
Yeah.
Hey, the Lightboard's a great tool, and talk about feeling interactive as you're working with teams, or maybe even doing something larger in a virtual way. The three-legged stool one, to me, Tone, it's the grand slam. Those three things about an organization will tell you everything you need to know. And if you unpack those things, no matter what industry you're in, it's consistent across all industries. So good visual there. Hey, I want to transition to this beautiful place we call the channel.
Yes.
You have been working in the channel for 8+ years now? Almost 9, maybe?
It's just a little over 8 now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Been a while.
Yes.
Been a hot minute. You've coached countless trusted advisors. You've worked at TSD level through all levels of leadership. And inside the TSD organizations with their staff and people, what have you learned about the channel in the last 8 years, and what sort of insights do you have for somebody who is wanting to improve their business, because, as we say, success leaves clues. Man, I bet there are a lot of clues out there for others to look at from your lens. So take your time. Walk us through it however you like.
Yeah. I think the first part of your question was about the internal workings of, say, working with either a TSD or a supplier or a vendor of some kind. But I think the real fun for me has been working in the channel with the trusted advisor or the partners, depending on where you come from. And these are, the small business owners that, I always hear the same thing, corporate America failed me. And they left corporate America to become their own business owners. And they had that entrepreneurial seizure that we all have at some point if we open up our own business. Like, I know I could do it better. I know I could do it my way. And the myth there, and keep all the money, right? Not always the case. So I like to work with that business owner that's trying to grow and scale their business, and in the channel, to which there is just immense opportunity to build generational wealth and truly build a business that can last a long time and really create that life by design that seems to be created in the channel is a great one. And it often comes up in the earlier conversations that I have with them when they engage with me with coaching. Is I always say the same thing. I go, well, hey, what do you want? And they always kind of say the same thing. Well, I want to grow. I want to get bigger. Yeah. And I remember, a mentor of mine, Keith Cunningham, when I was working with Tony Robbins, said it best. He said the same thing. Hey, all you business owners tell me you want to get bigger. And he goes, that would be like me going to the doctor and the doctor saying, hey, you're about, 40 pounds overweight. Your cholesterol's tipping up at about 300 and your diabetes is kicking in. I think it'd be a good idea if you grew a little bit bigger. So, the underlying challenges that have prevented them is also kind of that blind spot that they have that will actually get them to grow even more. In other words, you got to get small to get big again. And I've kind of come up with several kind of mindset challenges that every entrepreneur goes through that until they break through of those hurdles, their business doesn't grow. And yes, the mindset is the skill set, and growing somebody personally will help them grow professionally. All of that sounds good on paper, but what are those mindset challenges that people need to work through in order to grow their business? I went through them myself, and I learned the hard way. And now from coaching individuals, I see these patterns, and you start recognizing these patterns. Then you start anticipating these patterns. And then ultimately, I think the final level is where you actually start pattern creating and being able to create those patterns. But one of my favorite things, and again, to not name names, I always ask that partner or partners in general, or trusted advisors, business owners, I say, who are you in your business? And they always say, well, what exactly do you mean? I said, well, every business pretty much as it scales consists of 3 different identities within the business. And I'm just asking which one you are. So they say, okay, I'm intrigued. And I say, well, before you answer the question, let me give you a definition of all 3 briefly. And they say, okay. And I say, are you the artist, the entrepreneur, or the leader? And already they start telling me who they are. But I say, okay, let's look at one at a time. And I say, are you the entrepreneur? And they say, yeah, of course. I started the business and my goal is to grow the business. And I go, well, opening a business is very entrepreneurial, but being an entrepreneur is a different skill set. And that skill set is about systems and processes and growing the business without you being in it. That's a true entrepreneur, because an entrepreneur, knows their number, what's going to get them out of the business. And I haven't met anybody in this business that has known their number. It changes all the time. Mm-hmm. And And a true entrepreneur will also take what they did in this business and in this industry and be able to do it again. So a serial entrepreneur doesn't always stay in technology, but they might move on to something else and create yet another business. So all the time I get that. Yeah, oh yeah, that's me. I'm the entrepreneur. And I go, okay, hold on. I say, okay, so what about the artist? And they're like, oh, what do you mean? Well, the artist in any business is the person to whom without there would be no business. And they say, oh, what? That's me. I'm the artist because I started the business. And without me, there would be no business. So we start seeing a distinction here that this person is really working in their business, not on the business as a business owner. They're really an owner operator. And what they're doing is they're the ultimate sales machine. Without them driving revenue, they actually, there would be no revenue coming into the business. So that makes them scratch their head a little bit because it seems to ring true that if they're the artist, they're probably not really growing a business. They've actually just created a really great job for themselves that has them working some 7 days a week. The last one is the leader. And I remember speaking to a gentleman several years ago where he said, oh, yeah, totally. That's me. I'm the boss. Everybody comes to me. I must be the leader. I solve the problems in the office. I'm the person that they come to. And I said, well, really, the leader in the business is more that person who knows the color of the kitchen, to use Jay Bradley's term, when it comes to understanding clients and also the people who you work with. And the leader is the person who gets in those conversations. In my business, opening up my music school, there was this magic number that people needed to get to. And that was the magic number of having 30 students. And they would get to 18 and they would lose 4. They'd get to 25 and they'd lose 2. And at the end of the day, it was me having those conversations with them that kept them in the boat, kept them focused on the goal. And I can tell you that most of the people that I work with in the beginning, the last thing they want to do is have those conversations with their people. As a matter of fact, they're usually stuck in the back office and they're usually not coming out unless they're barking out commands or orders. And they really don't know what drives their people. And with that comes, again, psychological safety, a feeling of inclusion, and a compelling future. So the premise of this mindset shift is the worst number in business is the number one. And if you're the only one of those things, and you're doing all three. And like I said, they're 3 different hats and you had to wear all 3 to get here. But if you truly want to scale this as a business, you're going to have to bring in different talent because they're all full-time jobs, right? In all of our discussions that we've had, that entrepreneur, that artist, or the ultimate sales machine, and the leader of the organization, if you're truly going to grow, you're going to have to let go and you're going to have to bring in different talent. So the mindset shift there is knowing who you are in your business so that you can actually get out of the business and bring other people into the business to help it grow.
This past year, I've uncovered through dialogue that there's a whole next level of that exact thing. And it's not the artist, entrepreneur, or the leader. I think certainly, and we're going to come back to that, but there's a lot of private equity activity in our space right now. And I've talked to a lot of private equity companies about how they see the company. So maybe when you have a trusted advisor who wants to grow the company, maybe they're doing $250,000 or $500,000 a year in monthly recurring billing, and they want to get it to $1 million or $2 million. That's a certain set of mindset and skill and needs to be applied. But that same thing, and as you say, and we say, what got me here is not going to get me there. Mm-hmm. Those things are different to get to 5 million. And then when you're at 5 million and you want to get to 10 million, it's a whole other game. You don't have the time, the energy, because each one of your functions gets wider and deeper at the same time. And so in talking to private equity, they come out and say, hey, you're at 5 or 10 million. We want to get you to 75 million. Mm-hmm. Who's the chief operating officer? Focus on an operating company. Who's the CFO? Pardon me, leftover cough from Vegas. Who's the CEO? And I heard an interesting story. There's one guy telling a story about selling his company. He was less than 2 million in EBITDA when he sold his company to a private equity firm. And they had a goal of being a $9 or $10 million company. And so they bought his company and they were doing just under 2 million in EBITDA, and he was named the CEO. Well, by circumstance, dumb luck, whatever it was, he happened to run into a guy like at the country club or a neighbor who had a similar business, much bigger than his, who liked the sound of what he did. So they went and bought his company. Well, he was 9 million in EBITDA. Okay. So now they're at 11 million in less than 6 months. First thing that happened after that is they knocked at the door of the CEO and said, "Hey, we're bringing on another CEO." Guy was devastated. He was devastated. And they said, it's a different skill set. Now we want to get to 35 and maybe then 50 and then 70. And maybe the guy we hire to get us to 35 is not going to be the same guy that gets to 75. Not everybody turns out to be Jeff Bezos or Bezos, however you like to pronounce his name. Jeff's interesting in that he went from the garage office to, what they have today, and was able to grow and transition through all these different stages of the company. I think they're pretty close to being $1 trillion company, if not already. That's a very unique individual and a very unique character who has risen to that occasion time after time after time. But and I can certainly point out to many others like a Steve Jobs and even a Jamie Dimon. And Jamie was a CEO of Bank One. They were much smaller, and now they're 365,000 employees or something like that. And he's still in the seat, and he's rising to the occasion. But not everybody can. But the private equity folks also don't have time and patience. So they'll tell you they do, but they have responsibility to their investors. So they invest to build a business to get a sizable return, and they control that investment instrument, which are these companies, to grow. So I'm really solidifying your point is like, define grow. What does it mean? Am I at 250 wanting to get to 500? Am I at 250 wanting to get to 1 million? That's a certain level of identification and segregation of the roles and breaking out what you do. It'll be new again when as you're approaching 5 million. And it's going to be completely different going from 5 to 10. And then once you're at 10, to go to 20 is yet completely different all over again. All over again. Once you start gaining that size and scale, you're largely now an acquisition machine. You've got the girth and the financial backing and the credit and all of these things to put money to work. You just can't organically grow fast enough to get that size and scale. So you're going to be out there acquiring, finding opportunities. And with all of these companies that have sold to private equity, Tone, that's exactly what we see. Because now private equity has this big pot of money and they go, let's put it to work. This organic growth, this slow growth, this churning of a pipeline of 18 to 24 months, to grow this much. Like if we're going to do that, we got to go this wide. I'll go here, but it's all the way out here. And so I'm really just supporting your point, saying that you can't be all three. I recognize the need for most to be all three. We have plenty stories about people who have left corporate America because either it failed them or they saw a richer opportunity on the outside, and they're bootstrapping. Most people bootstrap. So, you're vacuuming the floor, you're installing the phones, you're washing the windows, you're writing checks, then maybe you hire your first person and your second and your third and your fifth and your ninth. It's also hard to let go of the cash. How many times do we see in this industry people get their second Bentley?
Yeah, of course.
Versus hiring their sales leader or somebody else instrumental to making the business better. It's natural. You want to enjoy the fruits of your labor. But if you really want to grow, and you want to get to this spot and you want to take it all the way, this mindset shift is absolutely important. Now, I'll end with this. Some people don't want that. Right? It doesn't mean that, maybe you just want to learn how to maximize your time. I think coaching is vital in that space. Maybe you're a $2 million MRR company, but you want to buy back your time. There are different strategies and conversations to be had around that, because maybe when there are folks that we know in this industry that operate in what they call the enterprise operating system, EOS, and the whole mode there is to retire in your business. We know some people who've done it pretty successfully. 15-minute a day call, rest of the day to themselves, 2 emails at the top of the inbox, and the company continues to grow because they keep supporting and fortifying from the bottom up.
Well, business is a system that works without you in it.
For sure.
At the end of the day, I might ask, hey, who are you in your business is one of the questions, but I also ask questions like, hey, what's your reinvestment strategy? And I kind of get the same look because reinvestment for that solopreneur or that small company growing is really taking out of their profit margins, their personal lifestyle business that they've created. So they don't have a reinvestment strategy, to your point. But the bottom line is, when it comes to the coaching, I think Marshall Goldsmith says it best in the book, what got you here won't get you there. Yeah. We've all heard the term. We're not really sure what it means until it hits us in the face. But what you don't know sure can hurt you. Yeah. And a lot of people are unaware of what it takes to build a business on that next level. And in that dialogue, it's really like Jim Rohn said, to quote another quote, is when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And from my standpoint, they're not coming to me for answers necessarily, but my job really is to change their perspective so that they see things differently and can think creatively to come up with their own solutions to help them grow their organization. And that's where I've seen that the most success actually is. It's not from click this link and I'm going to give you the blueprint or the plan or the playbook. This is, whether it's leadership being, it's hand-to-hand combat. It all happens between their ears. And that's why I love doing what I do, is seeing people become successful and growing their business and creating the lifestyle that you just described, where it's about get to, not about have to, got to, ought to, or should. Yeah. And most of the business owners that I come into contact with at first are doing everything in their business or doing way too many things, and they really don't have a path out. And they're kind of too busy mopping up the floor to fix the hole in the roof. Mm-hmm. My job is to point out what that hole in the roof is and whether they want to fix it or not, or if they want to just keep mopping up the floor.
Yeah, I think it's a waste to keep mopping the floor. And so if anybody out there is listening, is in the channel, in the description section of this video will be the link to Tony's website. It's twrmindset.com. There are email contacts there and ways to get in touch with him. I could tell you, Tony's been working with us at D&M for 8+ years. I've watched him coach many other trusted advisors in the business into great situations, through tough ones, through transitions of going from the artist to the leader and the entrepreneur and bouncing across those, to making decisions around people and shoring up the organization. So the reference base that you have, Tony, is quite impressive, and it's very strong. And if you're not investing in your own growth and your own improvement or your people's growth, you are missing the boat. You are missing the boat. This is part of what creates a compelling future for people. Mm-hmm. Right? This is part of what changed psychological security, creates it. Hey, they're investing in me. This is a good sign. Right? And then if you mix that with including what they do and how it fortifies the mission, no matter what role they're in, because every role is vital to the success of a customer in one way, shape, or form. This is the magic. This is the magic. This is the secret sauce for sure.
Well, thanks, Vic. Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure, for sure. And I love getting into conversations with people trying to grow and scale their businesses. So reach out anytime. I'd be happy to have a chat.
Good stuff. All right, man. Talk to you soon.
All right, my man.
Bye.
Good seeing you.
Too. Please don't forget to like, comment,